Okay. So, last time we saw the background, what created this situation where Arjuna found himself in the battlefield fighting his own brothers and his own grandfather and his own stepbrother Karna and Drona, who is his own teacher, right? So we saw the story, and I think what I got very good feedback about the story, because generally when people talk about Mahabharata, our way of looking at things, the way our human mind is trained to look at things is what we call bipolar. Bipolar in the sense that good, bad, okay, right, wrong. So that means yes, no. So that means there are two possibilities. It's like binary, right? Computer, you have binary 1, 0. There is no other possibility. But the whole life as envisaged in Mahabharata is that, it's not just between that right and wrong. There is a huge, what we call grey. And that grey, your ability to interpret and to make actions, make choices according to greater good and make the decisions, and not just following dharma is not just going by simple rules. This is to be done, this is not to be done. Okay? Lots of situations occur in life which are complex and which require interpretation. So living a life of dharma means that you need to be constantly alert, and you need to make sure that you are having a proper perspective or proper understanding of the situation, a larger picture of a situation in light of which you can make the proper decision, right? So which are the examples we saw which highlight this need to interpret? What are the examples?
Yudhishthir's love for dice and not refusing, and gambling away himself, his brothers, his wife.
Excellent, right? There is a rule which says that when a king is invited for a game of dice, then he has to honor it. Okay, that's a rule. What did he do? He just kind of followed that rule without looking at that, knew exactly how Duryodhana was, he knew how Shakuni was, and he didn't kind of said, okay, I have no obligation to say yes because it's not a fair game. Okay, so this inability to interpret dharma makes you at times make totally wrong decision, and according to him he was following dharma. Okay, and what the cost of that misinterpretation was? What? Huge, right? So this is what it shows, that if you don't interpret dharma accurately, then at times you have to pay a very heavy price for it. Okay, so therefore that was one example. What was the other example? Bhishma, exactly. What was the example of Bhishma?
He had taken a vow to protect the current king, no matter, even though the current king had acquired the kingdom by, I guess, not illicit means.
Absolutely, right? He had taken a vow to protect whoever was the king of Hastinapura, and he just stuck to it blindly. He thought that he was bound by this vow. That person, what are the means through which he had acquired this crown, right?
That is the sage.
No.
Bhishma was the
Bhishma, grandfather of Arjuna, and even Duryodhana, right? So he kind of took the side of Duryodhana because he thought that he was the king. He did not take into consideration that he became the king through wrong means, right? So that then, if that is the case, he has no obligation to protect whoever is the king of Hastinapura. So this is what we call interpretation of dharma, seeing a larger picture and making the right choice, right? And not just rule based. What was the third thing? We saw that sometimes the emotions kind of interfere in proper decision making. What was the example?
Was it Draupadi? No.
Draupadi, what did you understand from that example?
That, no one could stand up for the fact that this woman was, her morals,
modesty was being outraged.
Exactly. They all interpreted it as though Yudhishthira had free will. He made a choice. He lost. It was their interpretation. But what was at stake at large.
That's what she said. She
Exactly.
said, he's lost everything.
He's
nothing. How can
exactly.
I give up my
She defended herself, but even then nobody was
she
kind
asked
of,
for help.
and she asked for help, right? So where we saw that Lord Krishna was not confused. So Lord Krishna in Mahabharata is represented as a wise person who makes proper decisions, right? He doesn't get carried away. Otherwise, all these exalted people get carried away with one given principle, and it takes them on a tangent. Okay, so here who has the right perspective is Lord Krishna. He hesitated to help Draupadi. He was not like, yeah, but you know, he just did what had to be done because that was the proper thing to be done, right? Then we saw Karna. What was? Hi. Hi.
loyalty.
Excellent, right? So he had this whole complex of not being recognized, because it's true that Arjuna and they kind of there was a competition taking place, and they did not even allow him to participate in the competition because they said he was not a Kshatriya, right? And that kind of really hurt him, and at that time when he was so hurt, Duryodhana helped him out. So he had this unswerving loyalty for Duryodhana. He let Duryodhana do whatever he wanted to do, and he just backed him up. Why? Because this whole emotional trauma that he had of not being accepted, there was somebody who had kind of, you know, nurtured him, so he had his unswerving loyalty towards him. So then he forgot to see overall this person is really a very adharmic person, but he chose to what? Overlook all of that, and he, you know, so this is where we see the most beautiful thing about Mahabharata is that because of these major faulty decisions and a huge cost for it, we don't label Yudhishthira as not a good human being. We don't label Bhishma as not a good human being, right? They are all exalted characters. Dronacharya, Karna, they are all exalted characters, and at the same time they can make what? A decision which is exactly a wrong choice based on wrong understanding. So this is where you stop looking at the world as good and bad. Good people, bad people. Okay? Right and wrong. There is so much nuance in the world. You can be a very evolved person, and at the same time you can falter. So this whole thing of our being highly judgmental is curbed, where you begin to see nuances. Nuances about yourself, and also nuances about everybody else. That way you become a highly analytical, observant, alert human being, and less opinionated. Okay? That is a very beautiful quality to develop. Okay? Now that is the story. Now here what happens? And we also saw a story of Lord Krishna was asked to help them by both what? Arjuna.
We have asked for help from Arjuna as well as Duryodhana.
Both of them came to him to see him, and when they came, he was sleeping, right? And then
So when I woke up, I saw the one standing at my feet.
exactly. So that was Arjuna. So he gave a choice, and the choice was either on one hand you can have my entire army, all the weapons, everything, all the skills and everything that I have given them, the entire thing, and on the other side it is what? Non-fighting Krishna. Me, just my presence, but I won't even fight. And Arjuna had to choose, and what, right? And what was going on in Duryodhana's mind? He was really happy because he didn't see the value of non-fighting Krishna, whereas he saw the value of what? The entire army and all the weaponaries and everything he saw very clearly. So both of them walked out really happy, thinking they got exactly what they wanted. Okay, so that means life, you have free will, and you have many possibilities of choices. Okay, what you choose is what you have value for. Right? Generally people choose things that they have value for, and for that each choice there is a consequence. So that means you have a free will to choose, and for every choice that you make there is a consequence. That's why there is a need for growth, because you can't just say, oh yeah, I chose out of ignorance because that ignorance has a cost. So, and if, especially if you are given the capacity to remove that ignorance and see things more clearly, you have to help yourself. Okay, so Mahabharata is all about becoming more skilled in your decision making. Okay, now let's look at the first verse. It says,
One second. The Mahabharata the story starts with.
I told the whole story last time.
Okay.
So if did anybody record it?
I'm just saying, where
Yeah.
does it start at? It starts.
It starts actually long ago, but the way I didn't want to tell, because there is like story within story within story
Right,
within
right,
story.
right, yeah.
So I started by these two sons, Pandu and Dhritarashtra. Okay, and Dhritarashtra was the elder, and he should have got the kingdom, but because he was blind, he was not able to get the kingdom. So how he was nursing that jealousy or that kind of dissatisfaction, which actually really manifested so much in his own son.
Right, and then he had 100 sons, right?
Yeah,
Or
he had, yeah.
And then Pandavas.
Pandavas had 5. Yeah.
You just said something the Mahabharata is all about getting
Becoming skilled in your thinking.
Yeah. In decision making.
So the first recording I should view it, right? This is-
Yeah, because it's a very important, it sets the whole stage for why this battlefield, right? So I told the story, I mean, in a way it's a very long story, so I can't just tell all the things, but what I told was like certain nuances or certain important factors which then led to this particular event, right? The battlefield. So I don't know if somebody I think my recording will be there. So if you can, the video will be there. So if you can look, and if you, that will be useful. Many people that it was very useful for them. Okay. Now let's look at Gita. Gita starts where?
on the battlefield.
On the battlefield, right? And people think that it is a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, which is true, but Lord Krishna and Arjuna's dialogue is within quotes. Okay, the original dialogue is between Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya. Okay, so the first verse of the Gita, it is Dhritarashtra, who is the blind king. He is asking his own charioteer, who has been given the capacity to see what is going on in the battlefield. Dhritarashtra cannot participate in the battle because he is blind, he is unable to fight. So he is sitting in his palace. Okay, and his charioteer is also sitting with him, and he has been given the capacity to see what is going on in the battlefield, even though physically they were away from the battlefield. Okay, so here the first verse of the Gita, it says, Dhritarashtra uvacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakav pandavaschaiva kimakurvata Sanjaya. So Dhritarashtra uvacha, Dhritarashtra told. Whom did he tell? Sanjaya. Hey Sanjaya, okay, he says, Dharma Kshetre, place where the battle was taking place. Okay, so at this battlefield, the name of it is what? Kurukshetra. Now he uses an adjective. What is an adjective? Re Kurukshetre. Okay, what does Dharma Kshetra mean? This battle is between what? The battle is not just an ordinary battle which is fought for power, for money. It is fought for what we call dharma. Okay. Now, how do you know that this battle was fought for dharma? How do you know? The whole story that I told you, what was the story? What was the story?
That they were fighting for, they were told that if they are banished for 12 years and the 13 years they spend without being recognized, then they will get their kingdom back. And then Krishna went and negotiated, and they were not given anything, even a house with 5 rooms, nothing.
Excellent.
So they had to fight.
Excellent, right? The series of events you have to see. First, the Pandavas were tried. They were not given their due. They were given very small land in the whole kingdom, and that was a barren land. They worked very hard and they made it prosperous, and then that also was attempted to be taken away from them. Okay, they were invited to go to a palace, and it was a wax palace, and there was a whole scheme of blowing them all up, and they came to know and they escaped. Then they were invited in this game of dice, and it was a totally unfair game, right? The Shakuni, the uncle of Duryodhana, he cheated and he won the dice game. Okay, they remained incognito, but even then Duryodhana refused to acknowledge the fact that they were not found out. He claimed that they were found out, and then he refuses to give them the kingdom back. Lord Krishna goes to negotiate, okay, and he just starts with giving back their original land, which itself was a very small portion of the whole kingdom that Duryodhana had observed, and then he asks for finally one room with 5 rooms, and even that Duryodhana refuses to give, and therefore it becomes inevitable. A series of wrong.
What does he refuse? Why does he refuse?
He basically says that I am not giving anything back, because he maintains the fact that they were found out before 13th year was over, and then they have to go back to exile, and if they wanted any land back, then they have to fight and take it. Okay, so series of wrongs, not just at that time, over a period of time. Okay, so the time comes that you can't just yield and yield and yield, you have to stand up. Dhritarashtra recognizes it, that it is Dharma Kshetra. Okay, now where do you think he puts his son? In which side of Dharma? Dhritarashtra is father of Duryodhana. He is father of Duryodhana and Kauravas. So where do his kids fall? In the right side or the wrong side?
According to him, must be right.
Yeah, but it's wrong. No, how would you say either? You can't say either, right?
Why not?
The father is putting his son on obviously his own side, which he sees as the right thing.
But this is what I am saying, is Dharma, is the interpretation of Dharma. What is the criteria? Oh, because I love this person, therefore whatever that person does is right. Is that the way we learned how to interpret Dharma? No. This is our natural tendency. Our natural tendency is that I know very clearly what is right and what is wrong most of the time, but when it comes to my own people, what happens? The whole understanding is skewed by my emotions, and what is so apparent for anybody else to be wrong, it seems like what?
You're blind to it.
You are blind to everything. Okay, so this is exactly, Dhritarashtra is portrayed as somebody who's blind. Blind does not mean only physically blind, but blind in terms of his incapacity to discriminate.
But he was physically blind?
He was physically blind and also symbolically blind, both. Right? So and in fact what is very interesting is he understands that his own sons are on the wrong side of Dharma, and in spite of that understanding, because of his love for his kids, what happens? He lets it happen. Because very often our own decision making is what? Skewed or colored because of our emotions. We don't stand up for right things. Okay, either we are too passive or we are too aggressive, because when our own people are involved. Okay, how to keep perspective that Dharma interpretation has got nothing to do with whether this person loves that I love or not. What is right, and what is not right is not right, and you have to stand up for things which are right. This is one of the biggest lessons that you learn from this verse. He is not able to maintain that. Okay, so here he says, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. They have all gathered to fight. Okay, and who are the people? Mamaka Pandava. How do you know that his decision making was skewed? because he calls his own sons Mamaka, my people. Okay, and the Pandavas are what he calls Pandava. Okay, are Pandava not his people? Who are Pandavas?
His nephews.
Yeah, his brothers' own sons, but they don't seem to him like his own people. Who seems to him like his own people? His own sons.
What is the closest word to dharma in English? Would you say ethics or is it faith?
Okay, dharma as the very discussion of what is dharma is coming in second chapter. Okay, how do you define dharma, and how the definition of dharma is different and similar? What are the similarities and what are the differences between what we call dharma and what we call ethics? Analysis that will come. Okay, but here, yeah, that sense of right and sense of wrong, right? That for now you take it like that, and then there is a huge discussion. Yes, that we just have to wait a little bit till that discussion comes, right? So here he says that Mamaka and Pandava, what Kim Akurvata Sanjaya, what is happening between my people, which are my own sons, and Pandava, who are his own nephews. So he's creating that divide. So the closest people are his own people. Now that also makes you see the fact that if you were to have a proper perspective, what you call mine has to undergo what? Change, expansion. Okay, why? Because if he thought that Pandavas were also my people, his decision making would have been different. The larger your decision making becomes, what is mine, right? If you include now not only family, but you say my community, then you say my nation, my humanity, what is going to be your decision? So mine starts with very narrow definition of either me, then you expand it a little bit more, and then what happens? You include your family members. Then as you grow, you expand it even further and you include the whole humanity. That is what we call human growth. Okay? There is no such thing as selfless service. In fact, the Upanishads say, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Everybody has one's own. You like your spouse. Why?
Because he's your spouse.
Not only because he's exactly. Not only because he's your spouse, you can hate your spouse, right? There are people who hate, and that's why it ends up in divorce, right? Because, as Tushna says, he or she makes you happy. As long as that person makes you happy, you love that, truly love that person. The minute that person stops making you happy for whatever reason, what happens? That same person becomes source of resentment. Okay, you like your children, you love your children. Okay, but imagine now the biggest struggle that I see with all the parents is my kids don't do what I tell them to do. So it's a huge struggle, huge source of struggle. Why should that be a struggle? Every human being is an individual and has a decision-making capacity. So after 18 and all, they can make the decisions. Why is there such a need to make your kids to do exactly what you want them to do? Right? And if they don't, then how it becomes a source of conflict for you? Making everything what I call mine, and then what? Controlling everything which is mine. That becomes the whole human pursuit. Whole human life by us is lived in with what? Controlling people that or situations according to our own what? Likes and dislikes.
That's what you say. It starts at a very micro level.
It starts at a very micro level.
like, dislike.
Exactly. And who you think is your people. Then as you grow, what happens? That whole sense of mine undergoes an expansion. It still remains, it makes me feel good. Why am I doing community service? Not because community is dependent upon my service, but because it makes me feel that I'm using my talents and my skills, for the benefit of somebody else. If I begin to define my well-being by what? Helping others, I am what? An individual who is a mature individual. It's not that I am selfless. Please understand. I define my good by good of others. This way, the society, you never ask a question, I'm doing all this good and look at me. You don't say that. I don't get anything out of it. The minute you think that by helping others you are a loser, how long your goodness is going to last? Because you see yourself as sacrificing when you're helping others. But imagine you see yourself as a gainer when you help others. What is the limit to your helping others? You just expand and you expand and you expand because you see yourself as a gainer and not is undergoing an expansion. The more and more naturally you do things, right, without any sense of loss. That is what we call human growth. Okay, so here unfortunately Dhritarashtra was not yet there. His mind was very narrowly defined and therefore now he's anxious. He wants to know what is happening in the battlefield. Okay, now let us look at what happened to Arjuna. What was happening to Arjuna was something which is very interesting, totally different from what was happening to Dhritarashtra. He says, the next chapter 2, verse 2 and verse 7 and 8. Okay, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhavaha pruchhami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha yashreyasyat nishchitam bruhi tanme. What happened to Arjuna? This is the second chapter, but a series of things happened to him. Okay. When he told Lord Krishna to bring his chariot in a way that he sees everybody against whom he has to fight, what do you think was going on in his mind?
Huge conflict.
Initially, he just wanted to, all the skills he wanted to apply against whom he had to fight and how he was going to fight. His whole mind was strategy oriented. Okay, then there was a shift. What was the shift?
Fear and
Huge conflict. Guilt. Why?
because they were his family.
Exactly. How did Dhritarashtra define his I? His I was only his kids, and everybody else was not that mine. What was Arjuna's vision? Everybody is mine. People on my side are my people, and people on the opposite side are also what? My people. This is exactly what I mean by sense of expansion of who is mine. He saw his own people. He did not say that these are my 5 brothers are my people and those are my cousins who are not my people. He says these are my people. My teachers, they are my people. My great grandfather, my person. Okay? He was shattered. Okay, that whole thing of imagine how he must be waiting for this war to take revenge of what happened to Draupadi, how they have been wronged. From that to this complete shift of, oh my God, what am I getting into? Okay, if I were to win this war, what will happen? I have to kill all these people. He starts trembling. He tells Lord Krishna that in fact a war is won because then I can enjoy, but the people with whom I can enjoy, they all will be gone. Okay, you need, in fact, you can have a palace, you can have all the riches, but you need people around you, right? People that you love. If they are all eliminated, who will you enjoy with? Okay, so he says that the very people with whom I would enjoy the winning of the war, they themselves would be eliminated by this war. What use is for me to fight? Okay, so that is something which is highlighted by everyone when they talk about Gita, that he saw his own people and therefore he was shattered. He was overcome by tremendous amount of guilt, fear, sadness. So that is something that is portrayed. Okay, but if you really look at the verses of the Gita, Arjuna, in that state of mind, when he was emotionally shattered, he further goes and analyzes why he does not want to fight. Okay, in addition to the fact that his own people were on the other side, he gives 3 more arguments to Lord Krishna as to why he did not want to fight. What was the first argument? These verses are not here, but I'm just giving you the background so that you know what he's asking. Okay? These verses, because I can't give all the verses, I've just selected a few verses. What is the other reason he gave? He said that not only my own, but they are human beings. And if I were to win the war, I not only have to eliminate my own people, I have to eliminate so many others that are not known by me. So it's an overall destruction, and I have a certain responsibility not only towards the people that I know, but towards humanity through my actions. I can't just say I only care for people that I know and I don't care for people that I don't know, because they are also going to be affected by my actions. So he begins to look at the repercussions of his actions on people that are not known by him. That is what we call growth. So he says all these different soldiers who are innocent, right, and they will also have to lose their life. What is the third reason he gives? Imagine in this state of mind, he is just enumerating different reasons why he does not want to fight. What do you think could be the third reason why he does not want to fight? Anything else beyond my people and all the other people? What else? What would you think about?
The sorrow that he would have to, the weight of the sorrow would be so heavy that even if he won,
yeah, so that's what he says in the first thing, that the weight of sorrow is so much that in fact I would not be able to enjoy. That was, I think, implicit in this first argument itself. Now there is a third argument. This is where you see the character of Arjuna. Brilliant. His decision making, how far reaching he is. To whom this knowledge comes? To a brilliant person, not to a loser who has got nothing to, this knowledge comes to a person who is a discerning person. Okay? His third reason was, imagine the life after the war. What would be the society like when all the men are gone? Only women and widows are surviving. What a confusion it will create in the society. Far more what? Far reaching. Okay? Consequences of one's actions. Okay? Beyond this battle, what will happen to the society? Okay? You can't even imagine, what kind of day-to-day living people have. And he says, if through my actions I'm going to bring about so much disturbance in the society, not only now but for many years to come, that is a huge thing. What I do now is going to have consequences for generations after. How long does it take for the whole society to come back to normal? If in a society all the men are destroyed,
so the next generation grows up.
In fact, several generations. Okay, so the impact of his. Then, the final argument, the fourth argument. What is the fourth argument? It's a little bit what Tushna is saying, but in a slightly different manner, and he recognizes this whole thing of what we call punya and papa. Any inappropriate action that one initiates, okay, and if it causes so much disturbance to the society for a very long period of time to come, then what? You have to, what? Every choice that you make, there is a consequence for that. If the choice that you made is that enormous, which creates so much disturbance, what is going to be the consequence for me? This is what we call enlightened decision making also. Karma, exactly. What karma heard, that the person who creates little disturbance will also have to go through difficult situations. Now imagine what all I would have to go through for myself if through my choices I create such a huge disturbance. Comes back to me, right? That I can't get away, that inherent understanding, the understanding of inherent fairness in the world. Very important. Okay? If you feel, if your very implicit assumption when you live your life is unfair, the good actions never pay, and people who have inappropriate actions, they get ahead in life. If this is you may not be saying it, but if this is your implicit assumption, do you think your decision making can be clear? It can never be clear. Because it's always distorted. Because when you do something good, then what you will feel? Anyway, it's not going to be rewarded. And when somebody seems to be, right, in fact doing something wrong, in your vision, what, that person will anyway get ahead. So that whole sense of right and wrong is all upside down. So you see yourself as a loser when you are following dharma, and you see somebody else as a gainer when they are not following dharma. That is totally opposite of what, according to this whole scripture, like the laws of dharma are all about. That's why we need to understand how laws of dharma operate, and that we will see later.
But karma is an assumption in the Gita, or it's proved that yes, karma exists,
Yeah.
but nobody knows. And
See, basically what it says is that it's almost like physics, right? That every action is a cause and it will produce an effect. In fact, is it just something when you go to school, right, with an expectation that, yeah, once I go to school, or you want to send your kids to school with an expectation that when they go to school, that is a karma, that's an action, and it will produce some result. Is it just a belief? Is it a belief?
yes,
It's a belief, but is it an ungrounded belief? No. What you are seeing is certain cause and effect relationship. They will develop their capacity to think, and that capacity to think clearly helps them to succeed in life, right? So you are implicitly seeing this cause and effect relationship, the cause and effect relationship between actions and consequences. Okay, now when is that going to happen? You are sending your kids to school when the kid is 5 years old. How long you have to wait to see whether that is actually going to happen or not? Is it next day that you see the outcome? You don't see the outcome next day, but will you then conclude that, oh, it's just a random belief? No. This is what we call intelligent belief based on observation. Okay? Every action, the whole world is organized through series of cause and effect relationship. If the whole world is organized, this particular tree exists in the past. How many causes in the past?
so often maybe the result is not obvious to us, but it's there.
Exactly. But all this karma and all will come in detail. So right now you don't need to go through, otherwise we will start talking about other things. Let's follow the text, because everything will come. all these questions that we all have, they all will be answered. But just he is recognizing the fact that every action that I will do will have consequences. I can't get away from the consequences of my actions. And this is a very healthy way of living. Why? Why is it a healthy way of living? Whether it actually happens or not, what would be your mindset if you believe in that? What is going to be your...
You get a picture of what the entirety is, right? Sometimes you may be compelled to even go down a route where you know there are consequences. Right?
Think about what you do.
Exactly. Right? So even let's assume that it's a belief. One hand, a belief that things are totally random, things are chaotic, goodness doesn't pay, right? And all the people who do wrong things get ahead in life. That's one belief. And the other belief is there is a cause and effect relationship. For every action that I do, it's a cause. It will produce an effect, which is a consequence. Okay? And therefore, what I do, I can't be totally what? Disconnected with the consequence. Which of the two beliefs will make you a responsible, proper person with a proper perspective? Which?
The one where you understand you're part of a whole.
Exactly, right? Then comes this whole little proof of why do I make that will come later. But even just generally, it is much better to live belief system. Makes you a far more responsible person. And in fact, all this growth that everybody, whether it is psychology or it is any other discipline which is talking about human growth, responsibility, it will come when you see that the world is not random. The minute you begin to think that the world is random, then what will you do? You lose.
You lose your sense of responsibility.
Yeah. You lose motivation of it, and what happens to me? It would be extremely unhealthy, and this is why it is very important, because at young age, what you certain archetypes you take, right, of what the world is about. And if you have certain archetypes where there is no inherent kind of a wisdom, a wise way of looking at things, what happens is you grow up among maybe a lot of riches, power, position, but your life will become what? Totally out of perspective. And you can end up having so many problems in your life because you are totally deprived of any meaning. Your life is devoid of any meaning, devoid of any purpose, devoid of any kind of perspective. Okay. In fact, last time Nandita, I think everybody must know, and she said that in the UK they did some tests. Okay, because generally people think that philosophy is for people who are mature, who are a little bit older. They did some tests on kids. The kids who were exposed to some kind of a philosophy. What is philosophy? If you look at the word philosophy, it literally means love for wisdom. Love for wisdom means you want to have certain perspective with which you live your life. A life without any perspective, without any vision, is a meaningless life. Okay? So what that study said is that if kids are not exposed to any philosophy, they become what? Ruthless at times, random at times, violent, right?
No,
or
floating, like with
it's
no roots.
floating, right?
Probably won't be rooted, right?
Absolutely. Okay? And the kids who are exposed to some philosophy at a young age, how do they grow? They grow with some sense of purpose, some sense of meaning, some sense of responsibility, belief system. Okay? It's not only that it builds their character, but it also, they perform better in mathematics, in physics. Why? Because when you are not confused and floating, when you gain a certain depth to your being, you're able to delve into things deeper. Right? It's not just fit. It makes you far more grounded as a human being, and a grounded human being can engage in the world, whatever that person is doing, with a lot more capacity and lot more perseverance than others. Okay, so this is something which is extremely important to understand, that okay, maybe even if it is a belief, what kind of belief that I'm holding on to. There can be beliefs which are extremely destructive, and there can be beliefs which are self-enhancing. And as long as it is a self-enhancing belief, it is good. It is only going to help me. Okay? Then comes the later thing of what is a proof.
Did you say that if a belief is self-enhancing, it's going to help you?
Who kind of, for example, responsible?
But self-enhancing.
Self-enhancing in the sense, in a right sense, not in a more not self-enhancing in kind of a exactly. So yes, but we will see why. What is the logic? It will come later. Okay. So now this is a belief system that Arjuna is coming from, which is a much more healthier belief that I cannot get away from the consequences of my actions. Okay, and the wider the consequences, more what I have to be responsible for it. Okay, now along with these four things, there is one more thing which is going on in his mind. Okay, so what he says, now I am dharma sammuda chetaha. Okay, my chetas, my mind, is confused with regard to what is to be done by me. Should I fight or should I not fight? Okay. He wants to, now having said all the different reasons why he doesn't want to fight, he still, one would be what? Very confident that my decision is right, because he has analyzed the problem so well. He has given 4 different reasons. Okay, still he is asking Lord Krishna. He doesn't say that I am very clever and I have analyzed dharma so well. He says I am confused with reference to what is to be done by me. What does that mean? Humility. A mindset of a person who is in a situation from very wide perspective, still that person is willing to take in more inputs, right, and revise one's own decision making. This is something which is what we call, when one thing which is required to understand Gita, and that is what we call openness. Openness doesn't mean that you just accept every idea. Openness doesn't mean that whatever the teacher says you just say yes. Openness means that you have intellectual integrity. Intellectual integrity because we all have pet ideas. And we have invested in our pet ideas for a very long time. And when they get questioned, generally, what is our response?
To follow those only.
To continue to, exactly, to stick to my ideas and reject any new input which seems to contradict what I already believe in. So that means even when you come to Vedanta class, you come as long as the teacher says what you already believe in. If the teacher contradicts what you don't believe in, then what happens? Instead of looking at whose ideas are more coherent, you just reject the teacher. What is your learning? Zero. Okay, so therefore openness means that critical analytical thinking, objectivity. Objectivity means I'm able to examine. I'm not saying that one always has to give up one's idea. Please don't think that. A good Vedanta student will always have questions. Questions are a very healthy part of learning. You can't avoid questions. Because what you think life is and what Krishna... Okay, but how you ask that question, what is your attitude when you ask that question, how much are you willing to even consider the answers when they are not in keeping with your belief system, that is what shows your openness. Okay, here Arjuna shows openness after having analyzed this situation so thoroughly, looking at the consequences of his actions from 4 different standpoints, which are very far-reaching and a very responsible stake. Okay, he's still telling Lord Krishna, I'm confused as to what I have to do in this given situation. Please tell me what needs to be done. A mindset of a person who is brilliant and at the same time open, not arrogant. Humility. Okay, then he has a second question, and which is a much more fundamental question. One is a situational question, what should I do in this meaning of life? Meaning of life. That is also, because he says, Yat Shreyah Syat, that which will bring me Shreyas. Shreyas is a technical word. Shreyas means that which is, there is in Sanskrit language, there are 2 words. One is what we call Shreyas and the other one is Preyas. Preyas is your normal pursuits. Okay, how should I, get certain security that I want? How should I get certain pleasures out of life by going on vacation? And then how do I live a life of, some responsibility? All this falls within prayas. Okay? Shreyas is what we call moksha. Moksha means that which will bring me final fulfillment in life. Because at this point in his life, Arjuna very clearly understands that in terms of artha, okay, he had what? He was born as a prince. He was well-to-do, right? He was highly privileged as a person. In terms of skills, he was top. Okay? In terms of, he was not just unidimensional in his skills, he was multidimensional. He was good at everything. Many things he was good at. How was he as a human being? Responsible. Okay? In spite of all this, this is something which is a dream of a normal human being. He had everything that a normal human being could dream of, and he began to realize that a normal pursuit of artha, dharma and kama does not give one lasting fulfillment that one is searching for. When you see it very clearly, at this point it was very clear to him, because as Tushna says, he saw himself, he projected himself in the future, and he said, if I win the war, what would be the quality of my life after having killed so many people? Do you think I will be happy? No. And if I run away, and if I said, okay, you think he can be happy? No. So many things unresolved. So many resentments unaddressed. So that means he was at a crossroad where he says, whether I do this or I don't do this, in both cases, I find myself as what?
In a quantity.
Exactly. Okay? And I don't see any solution to my satisfaction, my fulfillment, okay, my freedom. And you give me that knowledge, he asks, Shreyas means you give me that knowledge which will give me that ultimate freedom that a human being is searching. This is why Bhagavad Gita and Vedas, how are they, what is the value added? What is the value added of Gita and Vedas to your life? Because almost every human being defines one's life only in terms of these 3 things: artha, dharma and kama. Artha, security Kama, pleasure, and if you're a responsible human being, dharma. Doing it properly, thinking about the consequences of your action. When you see that in spite of all three, following it properly, okay, you cannot, it's not a solution to your search for lasting happiness, lasting fulfillment. You're wanting that sense of freedom from inadequacy, limitation, lack. There is no solution to it. You search for that which will give you that freedom. This is what we call moksha. Moksha as a pursuit is what? Centered on what? I. It is not centered on heaven. It is not centered on what will happen to me hereafter. Now. My value systems, my understanding, my vision. Fulfillment is all about changing my perspectives and becoming in touch with realities. This is what we call pursuit of Shreyas. Shreyas means moksha, freedom. Okay? And this is why for the first time he says, Shishyasteham Shadimam Tvam Prapannam. Lord Krishna knew Arjuna for how long? They were cousins since child. Okay? They were playing together. He was constantly asking for advice of Lord Krishna. They were best of friends. Okay? But never Lord Krishna taught him about nature of realities. Why?
Maybe because he wasn't ready at the time.
Exactly. Arjuna had no interest. Where was his whole, where was his mind engaged?
Kshatriya, battle.
He was a Kshatriya, battle, skills, right? How to do things, exactly. Artha, Kama and Dharma. That is what he was doing. Artha means everything which you, it includes anything that you do for your security, which is gathering money, power, family. That is all what we call pursuit of Artha. Pursuit of Artha. Tell me.
Most
Whole day.
Yeah.
Almost whole day. Think about what you are doing besides those pursuit of Artha. You can be going for a movie, and that will come under what? Or you can Kama. List all your activities and you will see it is within Artha and Kama. Let's not call it everyday activity, which is to do with gathering certain resources, okay, enjoying and things like that, investing in relationships. Then sometimes power, gaining power. Power, you don't think that you have to be a CEO to gain power. You can be at home and you can have tremendous power over what your kids, your domestic health. It's all about power. Please understand. Okay, using your power to get things done. It's not bad. Please don't think it's bad. This is how a human being devotes his life to. Your power could be your domestic thing. Arjuna's power was what? His kingdom, expanding his kingdom, but it still remains pursuit of power. The dimensions can undergo a major shift. Through what you look for power, through what you look for security can differ. Okay? But the fact that each and every one of us, our whole life is defined only by pursuit of Artha and Kama remains the same for all of us. And it was the same for Arjuna until that day. That day was a shift. That day he says, all this for what? What I'm really searching for is the fulfillment. And all this, I'm not an ordinary human being. I've excelled in everything. I'm a privileged person. All this has not given me what I'm searching for. not only not given me what I'm searching for up to now, in the future I see no hope. More and more of this will not lead to what? My solution. Okay, this point in anybody's life is a very important key. Once, if I ask you what exactly are you looking for in life, what would you say? Happiness, fulfillment, contentment, freedom from being insecure, freedom from lack, freedom from, this limitation that I feel, helplessness that I feel. This is what everybody is looking for. Pursuit of artha and kama. You have more, then you want more. Then you want more. Then you want more. And then you have as much as Arjuna achieved, which was huge. And still, with reference to that goal of what? Fulfillment, he was as far as you are. So all that he accomplished was of what? Can you say it was totally of no use?
No, of limited value.
Exactly, right? Please don't now conclude that it had zero value. It gave him experiences, it gave him accomplishment, it gave him the sense of nurturing, which is very much required to come to this point where he can then ask this question. If you don't have that sense of nourishment, you will not even ever come to that point. So all that was necessary, but it culminated in what? Him asking this question, what will bring me the fulfillment that I'm searching for? Because this way I don't see any hope. The normal, does that mean the normal pursuits are useless? No. Please don't conclude that. Because this is something which is a very important. Vedanta does not create this whole dichotomy between material and spiritual. Okay? The minute you start labeling your pursuit of artha and kama as material, what happens is, what is the tendency? You kind of
That's a negative value.
Exactly, right? You attribute a negative value to it, and that is destructive. It is destructive because a resource is a resource. Is it bad? No. Exactly. It depends upon how you use it. It's not bad. Imagine something which is not bad. You start telling yourself this is bad. You're creating further confusion. Okay? Spirituality or object is me, what I'm searching for, therefore it is useless. That therefore it is useless is your conclusion, which is a faulty conclusion. What Vedas says, it can give you this much but not more. Through this, if you are looking for lasting fulfillment, it will not. But it will give you something. What will it give you?
The security and the ability to go out there and seek for
Exactly. Right? It will give you, resources are always useful. Why are they useful? It gives you a comfortable living. Yeah, it gives you a comfortable living. It gives you what? Opportunity to educate yourself, educate your children. If you have access, you can share it with people and you can contribute to life of others. There are n number of things that you can do with that resource that you are endowed with. Don't reject it. Don't call it a material thing. Please take out this whole, this spiritual world is full of, and this is not in keeping with what our scriptures talk about. They have a very healthy view. They're very, you need a healthy psyche to understand bigger realities. Okay, so artha has its place, but it cannot bring me the final fulfillment that I'm looking for. Kama also has its place. Please don't think that you're going and having a coffee or you're going for a movie, so therefore you are less spiritual. This therefore, all these therefores that you add are all useless therefores. Okay? If your life is only constant stimuli to keep you happy, then what? There is a problem.
Yeah, an outward journey only.
Exactly. So that means that it's almost like an escapism.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to divert your attention from the sense of inadequacy that you have, so you constantly need to amuse yourself, and you put yourself in a kind of a situation which will give you a high. This is an escapism. But just going and having good time is not a problem. Sometimes, or going for a play or a dance performance or a music performance doesn't make you a materialist. Aesthetics is part of living. It's part of healthy life. Kama in its own place, not as an escape and not as an ultimate pursuit. Then you can have a proper relationship with Kama. Okay? Pleasures. Then Dharma. Dharma also equally important part of living, where I think about the consequences of my actions on others and also on myself. Okay, but by being a highly dharmic person, I will get fulfillment. Ultimate fulfillment is also not true. Okay, so see also the limitation of dharma, very important ingredient of living a healthy life, but it is solution to my fulfillment is also again not true. Okay, then comes the question, how do I get this fulfillment which is behind all my pursuits? How do I get it? How can I get that fulfillment which is that something that I really want behind all my pursuits of artha, dharma and kama? What I'm really interested is not artha for artha's sake, security for security's sake, pleasures for pleasure's sake, dharma for dharma's sake. I want it all for my fulfillment. But they don't give me the fulfillment that I'm searching for, then what does? Can I give up my search for that fulfillment? Can I say, okay, now these things are not giving me, so now I just stop? Can anybody live a life like that? No. So that means there must be a solution. So this is where he is asking Lord Krishna himself for the first time that I am your Shishya. That relationship which was cousins, friends, now has gained one more dimension. That
What is the relationship to an equals?
of equals. He, even though it was equal, he does see that Krishna has something. That's why he is asking, but he doesn't quite know what it is. You know, sometimes even within your own friends, when you need an advice, you choose one person over the other because you have some confidence in that person's ability to see things clearly a little bit more. So he did have a lot of respect for Krishna, but he never felt that he wanted to learn this Shreyas, Moksha Shastra. Give me that which will give me Shreyas. So technically, Mitali, he is asking for that in this verse. Right? So he is asking for it, and he says, teach me that knowledge which will bring me the fulfillment. I am your student. Okay? Then he explains the idea that I explained in the next verse, why he wants Shreyas. He tells him why he wants Shreyas. He says, Nahi prapashyami mamapanudyat yachchokamuchoshanamindriyanam avapya bhuma vasapatra mudram rajyam suranam apichadipatyam. He says why he needs Shreyas, that is because he does not see how he can get rid of shokam. Shokam means what? Sadness. Sadness is not just sadness, it is that sense of lack that we all carry within us. Helplessness, something which is there in all of us. He says, I don't see how to get rid of it. Okay? Even if I get the kingdom after the end of the war, I don't see how that sadness will go away. And even if you give me the kingdom of not only this Hastinapura, you give me a kingdom of heaven, even that I don't know how it will help me to overcome this feeling of non-fulfillment. So he says, give me that knowledge. Acquiring more things, getting more and more is not a solution. Okay, you give me that knowledge which will give me the fulfillment that not only I but every other human being is searching for. Okay, so that is what he says, and then the teaching begins. So that what Lord Krishna is saying is what we will see next time. Okay, today you have 5 minutes or you have to go? You have 5 minutes. Okay, I want you to reflect, because this is a dialogue which took place thousands of years ago. Okay, and it is Arjuna battle and all against his own brothers. How does this story relate to your life and my life?
Because we all have conflicts.
Excellent.
We all have situations that need to be sorted out, which require us to act in one way or another.
Excellent, right? A lot of times in your life you find one thing that you're at a crossroad. There are possibilities what you can do, but you're not quite sure what should I do and what is the perspective. And this is why your understanding of dharma and how it works is of critical importance. Okay, and that is something that not only is something which is unique to Arjuna, it is something, that question we all have. Okay, that what should I do in that given situation, which is a difficult situation. One. What is the second thing that you find in common? Why do you think this whole story of Arjuna resonates?
Because you constantly have to, if you want to grow, you constantly have to question, right, yourself at all the different levels. And many times the crossroads that you come to in your life are that opportunity to step, I don't want to use the word forward, but step.
Exactly.
So now, how you step, where you step will determine the movement ahead.
Exactly.
Not.
You think that right perspective is something that we are all endowed with like that? You need to invest. Right? How are you going to have right perspective? Tell me. You think all the education that you have received of physics, mathematics, what have you studied? Geography, history. How much has it? Economics. We can be brilliant. We can be number one students. How much does it help you in your capacity to make decisions?
It gives you an intellectual informed capacity.
Excellent, right? Very good. I don't want you to say it gives zero. It's not true. It does give something. It gives you that any discipline that you have gone through, which is a thinking ability, but does it give you a proper range of things? Not necessarily. And this is why you can have a person who's a scientist who can be absolutely brilliant in that particular field, but can be a disaster in terms of what? Personal relationship. Doesn't mean that the intelligence will come in his aid for everything that he does. You can have a CEO who's his own child. No time, no attention, nothing, no investment. So therefore, the perspective to life is not just it. One of the things is your intellectual accomplishments, but it's not only that. Okay, and how will it come? You think it will come automatically? No. You need to invest. You need to expose, you need to challenge your own thinking. And you need to expose yourself to a given framework which gives you a much broader perspective to looking at things than the existing perspective that you have. unless you invest and unless you reflect on it, it will not happen. Okay? Therefore, this kind of a study of Bhagavad Gita is extremely important. It's a critical thing. It's not something for people to have when you have nothing else to do in life. Okay? Because your life is all about decision making. Life is nothing but series. Who you are today is nothing but series of decisions that you have made. Some were very good, some were maybe not so good. Okay? But the better decisions that you make, if you get a capacity to view situations with a better perspective, in light of which, if you make better decisions, who will it help?
Your community around you and you also.
First you, and after that, huge ripple effect. Huge. People around you, your family, community around you, it will have a huge effect. If you are given this potential to undertake this inquiry and invest in yourself and refine your decision making capacity, and if you don't take this opportunity, then have you used your free will adequately? No. The study of Gita is really which gives you that, not only that skill and that perspective, but it ultimately leads to your own freedom that you are searching for. That's a huge thing. And in the process, thousands of people can benefit. This is the best choice. You can't have a better choice than this.
But the fact that wisdom from so many years ago is so applicable today.
Absolutely.
It just shows that the human experience is the same over centuries and will continue to be the same however much the world changes externally.
Excellent point. In fact, I was giving a talk a few days ago. There was a huge gathering, and I asked the question that I asked them. I said, how much do you think the life has changed since Lord Krishna and Arjuna? How much do you think? So some people say the life is completely different. It's true. They didn't have iPhones, they didn't have iPads, they didn't have television, they didn't have so many things that we have today. So on one hand, if you look at it from that standpoint, it's very different. Okay? But if you look at it from human search and human need perspective, then it's exactly the same. All these accomplishments have not necessarily contributed for us to have a better perspective. So it's not that before things were easy and now they are difficult, or now things are easy and before they were difficult. Human quest remains the same. And that's why what is written thousands of years ago is still valid now. It is timeless. Okay? This is what makes his teaching timeless. Okay? So let's see what Lord Krishna has to say next time. Okay?
We're going to have class here till the 10th, right? Till Shona, till 10th and 8th she's coming back.
8 she's coming back.
And that other message that had come about somebody coming to give a talk on, I think, one of the...
Yeah, that was on 23rd September. That was like long after.
No, everything sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think this is somebody from South. I don't know him. I will just do the prayer. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.